People often say that EVs are nothing more than appliances on wheels. We know the type that say that, right? Nothing more than mobile phones with steering wheels. But what if a mobile phone manufacturer made an EV? Would it be any good? Imagine Samsung coming out and saying, hey, we've made a car. Apple, I think they were looking at it, right, but it never really saw the light of day. But yes, it has actually happened. Not just a mobile phone manufacturer, but a Chinese electronics provider, a rather large one called Xiaomi, have made the SU7, which is a four-door saloon EV that the CEO of Ford, Jim Farley, has said is one of the best cars he's ever driven. And if that doesn't put your engineers on their toes a little bit, then I'm not sure what should. Certainly got to get you thinking, right? But the car has had really, really good reviews. And we've got to start by taking a look at the numbers on this thing. Right, I had to park up for this bit. I've got the numbers for the Xiaomi SU7 down here on a bit of paper. I wanted to give them justice and make sure that they were as accurate as possible. So, from what we can ascertain, there are 4 versions of this car: SU7 Standard, SU7 Pro, SU7 Max, and SU7 Ultra, which is the bonkers track-focused one. But starting with the Standard, right, that comes in at an equivalent US dollar price of 30,000 US dollars for that base car, which is insane. 250,900 yuan, right, which is nothing. It's been out for a while already and is doing very well in China. 295 brake horsepower, 5 seconds to 60 miles an hour, which is pretty good. 73.6 kilowatt battery, 435 miles range, which is really good for that price point. Is insane. And these guys, right, they know software, so the software part of the car, I would imagine, is probably light years ahead of what you got in a Taycan, right? The SU7 Pro is the same but with a larger battery pack, a 94.3 kilowatt battery pack. These are eerily close to Taycan numbers as well. The Taycan Turbo S is a 93.4 kilowatt battery capacity. 5.7 seconds because it's slightly heavier, 516 miles range in that one, which is really very good. SU7 Max, that bumps things up. The first 2 are single motors. This one is a dual motor. This has 663 horsepower, 838 newton meters of torque, which is pretty impressive. 165 miles an hour top speed, 497 miles range. But for 42,000 US dollars equivalent, that is just insane value for money. 299,900 yuan, which is just mad. I think that is such bang for buck. And if we could get that in the UK, if you could get those figures in the UK for what 37,000 quid, I want to say, everyone would be in those cars. Just everyone. I mean, why wouldn't you? We don't have the same. It would just really take the soul out of cars, right? But it's hard not to argue with that. Now, here is the bonkers one, and I have to add, none of these are available in the UK right now. Don't know when or if we will ever see them at the moment. SU7 Ultra, this is the bonkers one. This has 3 motors, so it's a tri-motor car. Did they reverse engineer a plaid for one of these? Possibly, who knows. The numbers: 1,526 bhp, which is crazy. 1,770 newton meters of torque. That is 1,305 pounds-foot of torque. Absolutely mad. 1.98 to 60, 217 miles an hour top speed, and a 93.7 kilowatt battery. The Taycan 93.4, eerily close, right? Price of that one was 814,900 yuan, which is 114,000 US dollars. So a lot more money for that one. Still, if you look at the price performance, it's insane. Nothing quite like that. Yeah, you could pay 2 million for a Navara with not that much more performance. So that is absolutely bonkers. And apparently when this one went on sale in China, they sold out, I think, within about an hour of it going on sale. They sold out the allocation. So the numbers here and the pressure that ultimately puts on cars like this, if we see them over here, is not something that can be ignored at all. So really, really, really capable car, right? Look at the figures, look at the stats, really very good. But we've got to look at something else here. Now, we know that China are very, very good masters, if you like, of reverse engineering things. I've read recently that apparently Rolex fakes, Rolex clones, are now so good that it takes a real expert to ascertain the difference between what is a real one, a genuine one, and what is a fake one coming over from China. You might even have to open them up, look inside, look at the mechanism to find out if it's a legit one or a not so legit one. Such is the practice that these guys have at reverse engineering things. And you know, why wouldn't you? It happens all the time. We know it happens all the time. Manufacturers buy competitors' goods and tear them down to understand exactly why they're so good. And in a way, you could argue this should provide better competition, right? Could it stifle innovation if you're only just copying? Potentially a little bit, but it is a really, really well-known fact that China are masters at this. And it looks like, to me, if you look at the SU7, especially that side profile, right, that they might have done this with a Porsche Taycan. It's hard not to think about a Taycan when you look at the side profile of that SU7. Really very similar shape. And that's what I think has happened here, that they've gotten hold of one of these cars and aimed to potentially copy it as best they could. But they have made something that is apparently brilliant. Now, if you look at the SU7 and the Taycan, I would be very surprised if the SU7 itself drove as well as the Taycan, especially from a handling perspective, right? You kind of hope that there was some level of secret sauce that Porsche engineer into these things in terms of the numbers and the geometries that is just very hard to copy. And I would hope that that does continue to be the case for Porsche. But the fact that they've made a car that is so good, so capable, is probably quite unnerving to some of those Western automotive manufacturers, because the numbers and the price point of these cars is something to behold for sure. If you look at that SU7 Ultra, over 1500 brake, which is just insane. That's approaching Rimac Nevera type territory, right? Supercar EV territory in a four-door saloon. And I did read, I think initial versions of this only had very small stainless steel brakes that were overheating, fading and braking on track. And I do hear also that the production version of that Ultra is indeed, thank goodness, going to have carbon ceramic brakes, which you need to on a car with those numbers and that weight. I don't think there's any getting around that whatsoever. But what does this mean to Western automotive manufacturers? The spectre of these really very good cars coming over from China. We've seen other cars that they've copied as well. Of course, we had the Range Rover, Rolls-Royce copies. They've pretty much been able to copy everything, right, to a certain extent. And what does it mean if you're a Western automotive manufacturer? Should you be scared? Should you be worried? Well, yes, of course you should be. It's good in the spirit of competition for sure. But what I do worry about as well is the fact that we have this trade war situation. Trade wars, nothing new, right? We've had Anglo-Dutch trade wars, we've had spice trade wars, we've had opium trade wars, we've had all kinds of trade wars happening in history, right? And if you want to protect, as a Western government, the manufacturers that exist within your countries, what do? Well, you have to put tariffs on imports, right? That's pretty much all you can do. So, as a Western consumer, this potentially limits or restricts what you can get your hands on at a reasonable price, right? Because as we looked at earlier, the numbers, the price point of those cars, the Xiaomi SU7 in China, is bonkers value for money. It is insane value for money what you pay for one of those cars out there in yuan. It is absolutely mind-blowing. And you'll never see that over here in the UK, because we'll have tariffs put on them, no doubt. I hope we don't, in a way, because it really means we are missing out. It limits our options, right? And if you take the tariffs off, it forces the Western competitors, those traditional automotive manufacturers, to be more innovative and to be better at their price point. I do think a Taycan Turbo S list price right now is probably 40k too high. I really do think that, if not more, maybe 50k too high in my head anyway. So another area I want to look at as well is brand loyalty and the kudos, the power that a brand has, right? Somebody said in the comments recently, and I would agree with them absolutely, that people that want to buy a Porsche buy a Porsche. The number one selling car in Andorra last year, the Principality, was a 911. How mad is that? A Porsche 911. New cars sold more of those than any other car from new, as I understand, according to the stats, which is pretty impressive, right? But people who want to buy a Porsche buy a Porsche. Those folk who want a Porsche, would they be happy sat in what you could call a kind of copycat car, right? Or a mobile phone brand car, a Xiaomi SU7. Would they really be happy sat in one of those? Would they feel as cool sat in one of those? You also got to look at Tesla, right? Tesla, a brand that didn't exist not that long ago, but are now the number one selling EV worldwide, because it's a great product and people have just thought, you know what, the product's great, let's get on board. And now the brand itself has significant mass, has significant weight, and is pretty well respected, I would say. Less so amongst petrol heads, for sure, but they've done well. And this is what I think might happen with mobile phone manufacturers and electronics manufacturers if they start to get involved with EVs more and more. That you'll start to see these cars explode in terms of the numbers. And, you know, would I ever own a Xiaomi SU7 Ultra? It would have to be the Ultra with those numbers, right? Well, yeah, I probably would. And this is the thing with EVs, that the more EVs are out there, the more the kind of brand loyalty, I think, starts to disintegrate, starts to dissipate. If people are forced to drive an EV, I think they're going to be a little bit like, do you know what, because, especially petrol heads, right, because it's an EV, they're like, you know what, it's an EV, I just don't care enough. I don't really care what label it has on it, what sticker it has on it, because it's just an EV Lamborghini. Is it really a Lambo anymore? Is it really a Lambo anymore? I really struggle with that. So I think this is a very interesting time indeed for EVs as a whole, and a good time really for the competition, for cars that are out there right now and cars that could be coming in the future. We're going to see a lot more innovation, a lot more competition, and it's quite exciting in a way. But it's hard not to look at that Xiaomi and think, wow, you know what, I can probably get a Taycan for under half the price. And in a world where it's harder and harder to think about what is real and what is fake, am I even really here right now? That's it for this one. Do stay safe, stay well. See you on the next one, and bye for now.